Please.
Are you?
Back here with Chris Broussard, CP3. Now, we'll hold that close to the vest. CP3 finally getting his day in the Phoenix Sun. The best player never to make an NBA Finals made the NBA Finals. 41 points for Chris Paul last night. 0 turnovers as the Suns advanced to their first final since 1993. And for Chris Paul, 16 seasons, 5 teams, and he finally does it. Here is the star of the night after the game.
Since day one, they welcomed me with open arms. Coach, we did this 10 years ago in New Orleans, and we still got a lot of work to do, but we're going to enjoy this. And my family up top, I love y'all. Y'all see them right there? That's my game. Straight up, 16 years of this. 16 years, surgeries, hard work, losses, bad losses, but we're going to enjoy tonight.
Chris Paul is stamped regardless. Anything else from here is extra. It's extra just to solidify it. And, I know he wants it bad. I know he's happy about this for his first time, but, I know what he's on the pursuit of. And, we have that same understanding. We don't talk about it much, but we know what we're trying to get to. But as far as he needs a ring to be considered he's one of the best point guards ever play the game. And that's a fact.
But a ring never hurts. A ring never hurts if you're out there listening. Hey, Broussard, what does making the finals mean for CP3?
Great to see. I think, look, anybody out there who doesn't have a rooting interest in Milwaukee or Atlanta, I would think if you're a basketball fan, you got to be hoping that CP3 gets this championship. Because what we're seeing is, I think we're happy that the resume is matching the greatness. We've all known how great he is, whether you look at analytics, whether you look at his traditional numbers, whether you look at his individual greatness, the eye test. You saw how awesome he was, but he had never reached the finals, and he'd had a few bad playoff moments. So now to have the resume match what he's done individually, it's great to see. If he wins this championship, then I think it solidifies him as the 5th best point guard ever, as a top 5 point guard. That's my list, but it's a lot of people's list. I think Nick may have that too, along with Magic, Steph, Oscar, Isaiah. Then there would be Chris Paul. Right. I think a few things separate him. One is the leadership. And we've all talked about he's one of the greatest leaders, not only today, but in the history of the game. This season validates it more than anything because, look, to take a team that had never been to the playoffs or hadn't been to the playoffs last year and had not been to the playoffs for 10 years, to take them to the NBA Finals, injuries or not. I mean, that is a heck of an achievement when your 2 other stars are young and have never been to the playoffs. So he gets props for that. And you look at other guys, the great John Stockton. Great that he went to the finals. He went with Karl Malone. So you see other guys went with a better, supporting cast, if you will, than the young Suns team that Chris has. So that's a feather in his cap as far as leadership. And then there's a chance for redemption. Like I mentioned yesterday, some of Chris's playoff struggles and failures. This is a chance to make those minor footnotes in his career. If they win this championship, those things will hardly be mentioned. It's like Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas, 1987, we all knew he threw the inbounds pass that Larry Bird stole at the end of Game 5, turned the series, and the Celtics go on and win it. He redeemed himself with those 2 championships, Isaiah Thomas, so we hardly even think about the bad pass that Bird stole. It's almost erased from our memory. That's what Chris has a chance to do if they win this championship.
Right. Yeah. What does making the NBA Finals mean for Chris Paul? 2 things. It changes the narrative in the media, and then it also solidifies his place in NBA history. That's what it does, because we didn't know what that was. And Chris Paul, like you said, Chris, this guy is next level. This dude was always one of the best to do it. Now it's not a debate. We're not going to be debating like, oh, well, if he did this or, talking in retrospect. No, this is what it is. And then as far as the narrative, now we're giving this guy flowers. I know we keep saying that. You know, we got even Uncle Shan on you know, his show talking about flowers, flowers, flowers. But that's what we're going to be doing here. We're not going to be talking about the negative. And even when we do talk about the negative, it's always going to flip into the positive. Like, look, he overcame this. This was a guy that once played 16 years, and he persevered. And for you to talk about leadership, that means a lot, because when you think about guys like this, there's some guys that make themselves better, and then there's some guys that make everyone better, and that is Chris Paul. You know, think about what Booker said after the game. Think about what Ayton said just a couple days ago. This was the best thing that happened for me, the best thing that happened to my career. Go back to Bridges after the first series against the Lakers, and what he said, he's like, look, sometimes the facial expressions and the body language is a little bit too much, but I've learned to ignore that and listen to the message, and it works. So Chris Paul not only makes himself better, and he's done well for himself and his family, but there's other guys that's made their families' lives better because of Chris Paul, his leadership, and what he demands every single day when you walk in that locker room. We demand greatness, and I love Chris Paul for that.
I do too, Brandon, and I couldn't be happier for Chris Paul. But just to put a little bit of cold water on this story, I'm not ready to say it's a narrative-defining moment. He has to win. He does. And maybe I'm sounding sort of cold, but like when you get into Harvard and your whole family celebrates, if you fail out of Harvard, it's not a big celebration. You don't go like, oh, you know, well, you got into Harvard.
Right. Yeah.
Failed out working at Home Depot, but you know, was in Harvard, got right up there, final semester. Oh, failed out, biochem, got you again. You got to complete the journey. You got to get over the hump. And the person that got over the hump for me emotionally is Kevin Garnett, Nick. Kevin Garnett, if they lost that series, we would view Kevin Garnett the same exact way as we did in Minnesota. All-time great player who didn't have a ring. Just getting to the finals, it feels like a big deal right now. But in history, that fades away. We don't talk about Dwight Howard being successful with the Magic. We just don't. He got to the finals. You're right. We don't talk about Jimmy Butler, and that was like 10 months ago. We're like, Jimmy Butler can lead. Like, kind of. We thought kind of, but that's not going to be a legacy thing we're talking about 20 years from now.
So I disagree with you, Wilds, because I think it was important. Because you look at the best players to never make a finals. Chris Paul, 18 hours ago, 12 hours ago, was on that list. The next guys on that list are Nash, Melo, George Gervin. Like, those are the guys that come to mind, right? Chris Paul is not in that class. He is a class above those guys. And so now, like, is he in a class with Barkley? Yeah. Is he in a class with Malone? Yeah. Those guys never won a title. But it would be hard to make the case, because Broussard and I agree. We can show the graphic. We might slightly disagree on the order. But the 5 greatest point guards ever, to me, this is the list. This was hard to make the case when Chris Paul had never been to the finals. But now, win or lose, to me, Broussard, that is the list. And there's 2 things I want to do with Broussard here. One is ask him a question, and the other is get his opinion on a comparison. The question is this, because you weren't watching when Antoine was on earlier, but he very graciously, and I would argue heroically, offered me an apology for saying I was wrong about who the MVP was this year.
I knew this was it.
Are you ready to do the same after Chris Paul swept? Your MVP is riding chariots in Serbia. My MVP is riding to the NBA Finals. So I'm just curious, before I do the comparison thing, are you ready to say I was right about that?
Let me show you, Nick, what Adam Silver, Mark Tatum, and everyone in the NBA offices is doing right now as they're watching the show. They're going, this guy This guy. This is why he doesn't get a vote. Does he not understand it's a regular season award? Does he not get this? Mark, what is going on? That's what they're saying, Nick. I'm trying to help you. You're not helping your case, man. Nikola Jokic was the best player in the regular season who remained upright.
Right,
I mean,
Nick.
it's as simple as that.
Okay.
So, no, you get no apology from me.
Fair enough. Now the comparison thing, if I may, that I want your take on, because you mentioned it. If you don't consider Steph Curry a small player, because Steph's 6'3", the greatest small player ever is Isaiah Thomas. Guy 6 feet or under. Chris Paul, I've stood next to him. Right. If you take Steph, if you said it at 6'1" or under, it's Isaiah by a mile. And I've stood next to both these guys. They're both this much shorter than me, and I'm barely over 6 feet tall. So these, I don't care what they're listed at. Isaiah and CP3 are both 6 feet on a good day. I think their careers are